Shut up and sit down.
Hey folks, this is Tony Day. Today we are going to be looking at a technique that you can use with your Fuji Flog footage to transform into Rec. 709 without the use of any lookup tables. So this technique will be using DaVinci Resolve. If you're familiar with my channel, you've probably seen this before. And this is a, I would say, non-destructive kind of workflow. So let's get started and I will show you how this all works. Here's our footage, and thank you to subscriber Pascal for sending this in. This, I believe, is for a feature film that he is shooting, so thank you for that. Looking forward to seeing it. So the first thing I want to show you is the struggle that some people have when trying to manually transform their Fuji footage and why they usually need a lookup table to help them. This could be either the manufacturer LUT or whatever. So the issue is that, and I'll show you what the problem is just so you have an idea of what it is. The first thing, let's just correct this. Get a basic contrast. Okay. Let's just do something like this. Obviously that's not going to be a full grade or whatever, but I just kind of want to show you something. Then we'll increase the saturation a bit, like that. So this is usually what happens. People see this, and even if you white balance it, it kind of looks weird. It's got this weird green cast, skin doesn't look right, hair looks green. It just looks strange. Depending on what kind of monitor you've got, it might look different to you. But that's the point here, is that what's happening is that if you're just manually grading this in this way, you're going to have some hard times because the color space that Fuji has for Fuji Log is not Rec. 709. It's actually Rec. 2020. Okay, so what I'm going to do real quick is show you. We'll use a color space transform node. Okay, and we're going to go from Rec. 2020 into Rec. 709. Okay, now look at that. Our colors automatically look significantly better. See that? Okay, so this is being transformed more correctly than if we were to do the alternative and just start manually grading from here. See that? Okay. So this is a pretty significant step that a lot of people miss, is that they are not displaying the colors correctly for their monitor. If you have an sRGB monitor or a Rec. 709 monitor or something that does not have the capability of showing the Rec. 2020 gamut properly, you're going to have a hard time manually grading it. So what happens is a lot of people rely on lookup tables in order to get the colors to look correct. But the thing is that you don't really need to do that. So just for an example here, I'll just use this transform node to go from Fuji Log into Rec. 709. So now we're going into the, we'll turn this off right now. We're going into the Rec. 709 color space. Now some people will say this looks wrong. I mean, obviously this isn't correct right now. But the thing is that with these transforms, you have to make sure it's conforming properly to this new color space. So what we're going to do here, just to iterate that, I'll just show you right here. We'll go to tone mapping and hit luminance mapping. And then we'll go to the saturation mapping just to make sure nothing goes over Rec. 709. And we already have kind of a look. And if we throw our contrast on again, we'll just quickly dial this back to something more understandable. We get kind of a transform here without really doing much of anything. All we did is change the contrast and exposure over here and throw this color space transform on the end. So this essentially can work very much like your lookup table workflows, where you have the color space transform happening on the end. If you did anything after that, that's your prerogative. I usually don't do much after a color space transform. And because of that, I'm actually going to use a different method of doing transforms that can give you some decent roll-off and kind of an out-of-the-box look without having to do a whole lot within the node tree or anything like that. Okay. We're going to go into our project settings here into color management, and we're going to choose DaVinci YRGB color managed. So this is going to be a color managed workflow, which means that this is for color grading, not editing. So for the input color space, we're going to pick Fuji Film F-Log. For the timeline color space, we'll pick red wide gamut RGB log 3G10. There are several color spaces that you can choose here, whatever you want to work in. The only thing is that you need to make sure that the color gamut is wide enough. Basically, if you go Rec 2020 into like a Rec 2020 color space, that'll be perfectly fine because it's recorded in Rec 2020, okay? And then the output color space, we're going to pick Rec 709 Gamma 2.4, or you can pick whatever it is you're outputting to. This we're going to leave alone. We're going to leave alone tone mapping. And here where it says timeline to output gamut mapping, we're going to choose red IPP2 gamut mapping, okay? For the tone map, we're going to pick high, which is going to give us a lot of contrast, which is usually more of what I expect. You can pick whatever these you want and experiment. And for highlight roll-off, we're going to pick very soft. There's several that you can pick in here, whatever you want, but I usually pick soft or very soft. So we'll go with very soft for this one. We'll hit save. Now that's going to give us a Rec 709 transform, as you see here, and obviously we are going to have to do some adjustments in order to make this look correct. So let's just create an exposure adjustment. Alright, so we've got our basic transformation in here, okay? So obviously we're not done with this, we want to do a grade, but you can see how without us really having to do anything, we already kind of have a look. And we can do whatever in this exposure. We'll actually bring this down a little bit here like that. We can do whatever we want with exposure, like how we do any normal contrast or grading kind of adjustments. Next node will be a white balance. And because we don't have anything white or gray that I can depend on, this might be off-white or some other thing. And this is black, so I believe this is black, so we'll have something to black balance with or make sure that our shadows are nice and neutral. Later on, we will use this, but we will not be using this because I don't know what kind of white that is. Alright, so we're going to use power window here, grab some skin, and try to balance this out. So using the skin tones is not really a great method, but it can kind of help in a pinch when you don't really have much to rely on. So we've got that. Okay, and I'm just going to do two different looks based on the same kind of contrast idea. One's going to be kind of a warmer look, with neutral colors and kind of an emphasis on the orange colors that are kind of predominant in this image. And then the other one's going to be a standard kind of teal and orange look. So let's get started with that, okay? These are obviously not the only looks that you can do, but these are just, examples. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is do a color adjustment, and what I'm going to do is pull the reds and the yellows toward orange to get kind of more of a orange look in the whole thing. This will help squeeze the skin tones more into that consistent orange range and also give us a solid color that we can use for the teal and orange look later on. So, alright, let's go to our hue versus hue. So we will also go ahead and do a saturation adjustment. Alright, so here we're going to add a little bit of contrast pop. We'll make the detail out like there. Detail size will be like there. Change these thresholds. Softness, and then we'll blend it. So we're just going to add a little bit of contrast here, that's all. Just like around like there. A little bit more like that. Before, after, before, after. So just a little bit of extra contrast in there. Just going to double check my skin tones, make sure using this little circle thing, I want to make sure that we're not going too high and getting too hot. That's before, after, before, after, before, after. Okay. So we'll just do a couple more things here. Let's check that black is neutral. So we're going to go here. So we're going to go ahead and just sample some of this black. Make sure that it is indeed black. Okay, and we got the 2x zoom on. You can see that black is right there in the middle. Turn the saturation up. You can see that it's right there in the center. Not much that we really need to do to make that any more black than it already is. So we'll ignore it. And then last thing we'll do is a sat curve. Oops. So on this curve, we are going to do this. We'll go here, and we're going to go to Luma versus saturation. We're going to pull up the shadows, and then we're going to pull down the highlights, just like that. Right there. Okay. Then the last thing we're going to do, just to make this a little bit more dynamic and draw the eye toward the middle, which is where she is, we're going to add a vignette. Put that there in the middle, like that. A smaller, soft invert. Bring this down, like that. Okay. Okay. All right. So there's our look. Finish that. Kind of a, I guess, monochromatic kind of thing. Just have those yellows and oranges in there, and we have neutral shadows. So we can go ahead, like if we wanted to, we could bring the shadows down a little bit more. I'd say for sake of getting this to you guys for a tutorial, this should work perfectly fine. There's of course a million things that you could do to change this to make it whatever you want. We could, warm the highlights or anything like that. And we can also do things like add grain, but let's go ahead and do the second look real quick. We're going to use the same kind of setup as we had before. We're going to remove these two things on the end for now. We're going to leave this pop in, and we're just going to create several nodes. High, mid, shadows. And we're going to use the log wheel to introduce a little bit of teal and orange to the shot. Some people put the vignette before this, but sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. In this case, I won't do it because sometimes I don't like the effect when you put it in front. Sometimes it changes things to teal that I don't want to. So we're going to use the waveform here. And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce teal into the shot and try to get just in here. Okay. And we'll use so we're just going to try to introduce teal into this area. So we're going to pull the shadow wheel in like that. Okay, so we're going from blue to teal to orange to neutral. That's what we want to go for, okay? See that? Okay, now what we can do, if we want to fine tune this, we can go here to low range and we can adjust this to grab more or less of the image. And we want to make sure we're steering clear of the skin tones and the hair. I want her skin to kind of pop out from this teal. All right, so there we've got a look. Okay, check the vector scope, and what we want to do is make sure there's a direct color contrast here, which there apparently is. And with this one, we could do whatever we want here. If we want to kind of push the midtones up a bit into orange a bit more, we can do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. We've got that pushed up a bit more. We can check in here, make sure that it's not going too far, or maybe it's going just far enough. Rotate that back this way slightly. Okay. And then for our highs, if we're going for neutral in the highs, we can go ahead and grab the sky, which which is pretty neutral in here, and we can look at trying to push those highlights back toward neutral. Okay. Okay, so you can see how that kind of affects things in here, especially. Okay, there is a vignette on the lens, so you're going to see a little bit of a difference, but all right. So now we're going to go ahead and throw all of these into a compound node. We're going to call that look. Okay. We've got our vignette, and we've got our saturation curve. And what I'm going to do with this one, you can leave it like this if you want. Some people have the saturated shadows. But usually with the deep shadows, I prefer them to be more neutral. So what we're going to do with this, we're going to change the curve a little bit. Before, after, so you can especially see down in here how much of a difference that makes. Okay. And there's our look. So those are just two looks that you can do with this method. You know, obviously the most important thing, learning Rec 2020 needs to be conformed properly to Rec 709. If you don't know how to do that manually and you don't have a monitor for it and all those things, you do have tools available to you in Resolve to help you. You do not have to rely necessarily on LUTs, but it does not hurt to rely on the things that you need, such as a color space transform, using RCM, which is what we used, right? Red IPP2 mapping or anything like that, okay? So again, these are just two looks that I decided to do for this tutorial in particular. I hope that this was helpful to you. Please let me know if there are any questions, comments, or concerns in the comment section below, and I can help, or maybe somebody else can give some help to you. All right? Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.